sir, are a scholar and a gentleman.
One beautiful day, an ordinary family is celebrating a child's birthday. Dad is grilling barbecue, Mom is chatting with friends, while the kids are amazed by a cowboy's lasso throwing skills. Later, the children go to eat cake, and Cooper's daughter suddenly freezes, staring at the horizon. The man turns around and sees a huge nuclear mushroom cloud rising over the city. The next minute, the blast wave reaches their home. The owner hides his family in a shelter, while Cooper and his daughter jump on a horse and ride away as nuclear mushrooms rise behind him. 219 years have passed. Lucy is a young woman who possesses many skills and lives in shelter number 33 with her father and brother Norman. Unfortunately, it's impossible to find a man who wouldn't be related to her. Therefore, the council decides to allow her to take a husband from another colony. The happy girl puts on the communal wedding dress, while her neighbors, led by her father, the shelter's warden, prepare tables for the wedding, displayed in a field surrounded by a 3D image of distant mountains. The father is happy for his daughter, regretting that her mother didn't live to see her wedding. Then comes the moment when people head to the portal, guarded by the gatekeeper Chad, Lucy's cousin. He has long loved the girl but must admit the fairness of genetic ethics. The young man presses a button, the portal opens, letting in a delegation from a neighboring colony. Their leader reminds that for fresh blood, they must receive seeds and spare parts from machinery, and a young man is brought to Lucy. Their marriage is registered, and everyone sits at the tables. The shelter's residents notice that the guests are rather uncouth but decide not to focus on this. Lucy's father delivers a speech, hoping that the next generation might finally live on the surface. People dance and enjoy themselves, much to Norman's displeasure. The groom asks the girl to show him the bedroom, and she leads him to the room. The young couple begins to perform their duties while Norman patrols the colony and suddenly finds the body of one of the colonists. And Lucy unexpectedly hears a distant scream. She puts on a universal bracelet, which instantly shows that her young husband is infected with radiation, indicating he came from the surface. Realizing he's been found out, he lunges at her and throws her against the wall. Dazed, the girl watches as the guy takes a knife and prepares to kill her. Lucy remembers her skills and tries to take the knife, but the man stabs her in the side. At that moment, an alarm sounds. The man gets distracted, and Lucy knocks him out with a vase hit to the head, then administers first aid to herself and rushes to the armory, where she finds a pistol and hurries to the room where her fellow tribesmen remained. She kills an alien she encounters, but upon leaving the room, she witnesses a real battle. Lucy manages to save Norman when her unmade husband appears, but her father drowns the son-in-law in a barrel of water and rushes to a signal about a breach in the doors. Lucy runs after him and freezes in front of a team of aliens who have taken the shelter's residents hostage. The attacker's leader offers the man a choice: his fellow tribesmen or Lucy. As the girl tries to understand what this means, her father locks her in a compartment, after which his captors take him with them from the surface when an explosion destroys the gates. Meanwhile, on the surface of the Earth, in the Brotherhood of Steel barracks, young men are beating one of them, Paladin Maximus. His friend helps the guy recover and leads him to classes where they are taught useful wasteland skills, as soon they will serve as knights. They are seekers and guardians, and must be able to distinguish ancient artifacts. At this time, to the Paladin's great admiration, Steel Knights arrive at the base. Later, the friend leads Maximus to a hangar where their armor is stored, to look at them. Later, Maximus hears cries of jubilation and finds out that some of them were promoted. Among them is his friend, who will become the assistant to Knight Titus. But in the morning, the barracks are awakened by a wild scream. It turns out that someone put a blade in the future assistant's boot, and the girl severely injured her foot. Maximus is arrested and led to the Brotherhood's leader. In the shelter, order is being restored. Lucy is stitching up her stomach wound, and people gather for a council meeting. She requests that a squad be assembled and sent to the surface to search for her father. However, the council refuses to do this. Lucy then gathers the necessary items and heads to the gates, accompanied by her brother. Chad rushes to go with her, but she sedates him and says goodbye to Norman. The gates open and the girl steps onto the surface. She surveys the world of sand, where traces of the past tragedy still linger, and walks towards the sea. Maximus is accused of maiming a comrade out of envy, but he denies it. The leader realizes the boy is not guilty and appoints him as an assistant to the Steel Knight. The next day, the leader assigns the knights and their assistants the task of finding a escaped scientist who has stolen a very important object. Knight Titus and Maximus load up on a helicopter and fly to their designated sector. At the same time, a band of bounty hunters lures a wild ghoul from the grave to find this scientist heading to the witch Moldaver, with whom the ghoul has old ties. Unexpectedly, the ghoul shoots the hunters and sets off on his own accord. Lucy travels across the surface and one day stops to camp near an abandoned house. She makes a fire and falls asleep by it. She awakens to strange sounds and sees a dog devouring a huge insect. A man sitting by her fire explains that the cockroaches not only survived the nuclear blasts, they mutated and are now very dangerous. He advises the girl to return to the shelter as she does not know the rules of the outer world, but Lucy is obliged to find her father. The man leaves. Meanwhile, the Steel Knight and Maximus land in the right sector. Near their landing spot, the fugitive scientist and his dog hide in a cave. Sometime later, the knight and his assistant arrive there. Maximus immediately finds the sought-after scientist's tracks, and the knight heads into the cave. Maximus is also forced to go with him, though he has no armor. Inside, a giant mutant cave bear attacks them. The knight engages in combat, but the beast overpowers him, and Titus suddenly starts to run. Maximus barely manages to kill the huge beast. The knight turns out to be a weak man who blames and insults the boy. Then Maximus refuses to revive the wounded knight and lets him die, deciding to find the fugitive himself. He dons the armor himself and learns to use it. The boy is amazed at how his strength has increased and the boundless opportunities that have opened up before him. Incidentally, he saves a weakling, although it turns out that the person was not very good. He realizes that he needs to figure out who is worthy of protection first. Lucy reaches a town where she was advised to look for traces of her father's kidnappers. She enters one of the shops, where an elderly saleswoman, recognizing her as a shelter resident, advises the girl to leave this place. Shelters are underground havens where the rich hid while the world perished, so no one here will help her. The girl goes outside where the scientist with the dog approaches her again, surprised that she is still here. But then the saleswoman, who turns out to be waiting for him, calls out to him. And suddenly, the ghoul appears, who has also come for the scientist. He intends to take him when the saleswoman promises money to anyone who helps protect the scientist. Then the ghoul shoots the scientist in the leg to prevent him from escaping and engages in battle with those who want the reward. The ghoul shoots everyone while Lucy sneaks into the shop, finds the order book, and learns the address of Moldaver. She wants to leave, but sees how the ghoul injures the scientist's dog and hears his plea for help. She stands up for him and shoots the ghoul with a capsule, which only makes him laugh. Then a knight lands in front of the ghoul. Maximus asks the girl to look after the scientist while he fights the ghoul. She and the saleswoman take the injured scientist into the shop, where the woman attaches an iron leg to him and offers to accompany him to Moldaver, giving her the coordinates. The pair leave while the ghoul fights the knight and quickly finds his weak spot. Maximus has not yet mastered all the advantages of the suit, which costs him losing his navigation ability. The Iron Knight is thrown far from the shop, and at that moment, the ghoul realizes that his target has escaped. Meanwhile, Lucy and the scientist stop to rest, and the girl watches in horror at the scientist's bloodied leg. She realizes they won't make it, and the man confirms this. He confesses that he will soon die, but she must definitely deliver his head to Moldaver. He pulls out a saw and dies. Sometime later, the ghoul finds the headless body of the scientist amidst the sandy wasteland and follows the tracks of Lucy, who is carrying the head to Moldaver. Soon the girl stops to rest and, after snacking, examines the head, wondering what is so special about it. Just in case, she inserts a tracking device into its nostril. Maximus examines the armor and finds a malfunction. Suddenly, he is called from the base, which surprises him. He reports the death of his assistant and is promised a replacement, though he vehemently opposes this. The boy heads to the nearest town, where he finds a workshop and, paying all the money he has, repairs the broken module. But when he returns to the suit, he discovers a gang of local marauders trying to dismantle the armor for scrap metal. He engages in a fight, but is hit hard in the face. The boy regains consciousness to see that the armor has been breached. He grabs a piece of metal lying nearby and uses it to destroy the attackers. Then he sees a helicopter arriving, dropping off a new assistant. The assistant turns out to be one of his tormentors from the training camp. Maximus manages to close the helmet, and the new assistant does not notice the substitution. Lucy reaches the place where Hollywood once stood. She stops by a pond when an unknown monster attacks her, snatching the backpack with the scientist's head and disappearing into the water. Lucy tries to track the thief but is caught in the ghoul's sights, to whom she explains what happened with the head. At this time, the Shelter Council conducts an investigation into Lucy's escape, after which Norman realizes that no one intends to search for either his father or sister. In the desert, Maximus torments the assistant with various misdeeds, avenging past humiliations, but the latter continues to serve the Steel Knight willingly. They find the ghoul's tracks with a special device, follow them, and find the headless body of the scientist. Meanwhile, the ghoul sets up a hunt for the underwater monster, using the girl as bait. Soon, the beast emerges onto the shore. It grabs Lucy, but the ghoul manages to pull her out. The girl barely manages to fend off the attack, but the underwater monster escapes, taking her boot. The enraged ghoul drags Lucy along. At this time, the Steel Knight's assistant fills the armor with water, talking about his life. Suddenly, Maximus asks him to talk about himself. The boy confesses that in fact he was a decent guy, and they beat him as part of the tradition like any other newbie. Now he regrets that Maximus didn't live to be called up for service. They move on and soon reach the pond. The pair enters the water and immediately sees the monster. Maximus demands the assistant to go ashore and takes on the fight himself, but the boy shoots at the creature and it chases after him. Maximus manages to pull the boy from the monster's jaws, and it dies, spitting out the scientist's head and Lucy's boot in its last act. Then a dog runs up to them, which continues on with them. The ghoul leads Lucy through the wasteland, denying her water, and soon they arrive at the place where a movie studio once stood, where actor Cooper and his wife worked. Soon they reach an abandoned clinic from which male screams can be heard. Entering, they find an old acquaintance of the ghoul, undergoing mutation and suffering because of it. The condition could be alleviated with special medication, but the ghoul doesn't have any, so the ghoul relieves the poor soul from his misery. The girl doesn't understand why he did it, but he explains they need something to eat. The girl mentions that they also had it tough, but never ate their own kind. Then the ghoul forces Lucy to cut up the body to take this meat with them. They continue on, although it becomes increasingly difficult for the girl without water. Soon the ghoul stops in front of a structure where radioactive water has accumulated. Lucy can't resist and starts drinking it, earning her companion's approval. She is finally beginning to understand the life of the wasteland. He is her future, and it won't be long now. Then he coughs, and Lucy tries to use this moment to escape, but stops in front of a huge crater, where she gets caught in his lasso. She tries to break free and accidentally bites off the ghoul's finger, for which he cuts off one of her fingers. Soon they reach an old supermarket, where the ghoul offers the woman in exchange for the items he needs. Stunned, Lucy enters the building, not noticing that the ghoul falls into unconsciousness. Inside, she is greeted by a robot. It invites Lucy to follow and implants a new finger for her. Then it pities her and confesses it will just take her organs, and immediately sedates her. Later in the shelter, Norman is delivering food to the aliens captured during an attack, and one of them confesses that the inhabitants of Shelter Number 32, which they captured before this, were planning something very bad. Norman tries to access the network to find information about Shelter Number 32, but the data are classified. Together with Chad, they clear the debris and penetrate Shelter Number 32, where they find a devastated field in the desiccated corpses of the inhabitants. But if they were dead when the aliens arrived, it turns out they killed each other. Lucy wakes up and sees many women locked in glass cabinets, ready to be dissected for organs. The robot prepares to open her chest cavity, but cuts her bonds instead, and she wriggles out from under its saw and disables the robot. Then she fills syringes with drain cleaner, reprograms the robot, and in its company, goes to the owners of the dreadful place. She forces them to release the prisoners, and people flee. But not all. Lucy forces the opening of the last cages. The owners comply, and out come zombies, who immediately tear apart two organ traders. Lucy surveys the battlefield in horror as the last zombie prepares to attack her, but she finds a pistol in her hand. Norman and Chad continue their inspection of the neighboring shelter and learn that its door was open from the outside with a key bearing the name of Norman and Lucy's mother. and Lucy finds medicine to sustain the ghoul's life, and despite the torture she endured, she hands the medication to the ghoul. Maybe she will look like him on the outside, but inside, she will never be like him. The girl leaves, and the ghoul goes into the shattered store and takes the necessary meds to bring himself to a relative semblance of order. Then he stuffs his hat with medicines. But then, he notices a video recorder, puts in an old tape where Cooper plays a cowboy, and sits down in front of the television. Maximus and his assistant settle down to rest. Thaddeus cannot contain his delight at being rescued, as knights rarely treat their assistants kindly. He asks to be branded. Maximus obliges and lifts his helmet. However, upon recognizing him, the assistant attacks, resulting in Maximus breaking his leg. But Thaddeus manages to extract a nuclear core from the armor, immobilizing the exoskeleton, and leaves, taking the scientist's head with him. Giant cockroaches immediately attack the immobilized suit. Maximus, terrified, awaits his death when the insects scatter from gunfire, and Lucy approaches the knight. She explains why she needs the scientist's head and helps the man out of the suit, and he gives her medication for radiation sickness. When Lucy recovers, she suggests they go after the head together, since she has a tracker. They will hand it over to the Brotherhood, in return for which the knights will help her find her father. Maximus agrees. At the same time, in Shelter 33, instead of her father, Betty is elected as the warden. Norman dislikes this and studies the history of the shelter. Suddenly, he realizes that all caretakers were selected from the residents of Shelter 31. Lucy and Maximus reach a bridge where they are stopped by a pair of vagrants. They pretend to be scared and ask for permission to pass. The couple, raising their hands, tries to walk away. However, the suspicious Maximus manages to shoot first, saving their lives, though he injures his hand, and Lucy realizes how naive the shelter's residents are. Soon they reach a billboard of the New Californian Republic. The girl is upset because they live with the belief that they are meant to revive America, but it turns out everything has already happened on the surface. Maximus reassures her, as there is no republic anyway. Soon they arrive at a huge crater in the middle of the city. The boy confesses that he survived this hell by hiding in a refrigerator, but then Lucy realizes that Maximus's wound is much more serious and leads him to a building with a clinic sign. Maximus lags behind, and when he enters, the girl is nowhere to be found. He searches for her and enters a chamber between two doors. The space fills with gas, causing the boy to lose consciousness. Betty leads her people to Shelter 32 to announce a partial relocation, as these resources are too valuable. Chad and Norman are surprised to see that the bodies have been removed and all traces of the tragedy have disappeared. Norman inquires about the whereabouts of his mother's key after her death. Betty confesses that they buried the woman with it. Maximus and Lucy come to in the shelter on stretchers. Maximus receives medical care. The shelter leader asks the couple to stay, as the boy needs treatment. Moreover, the suppliers have found armor and will soon deliver it here. Lucy thanks them for the refuge, and the leader informs her that she was born on the surface like many of them. The couple spends several hours in quarantine. From the conversation, it turns out that Maximus never knew a woman's love. Lucy is ready to teach him this art, as it is considered natural in the shelter, but the boy is embarrassed. Moreover, it is not customary among knights. Later, they go to lunch, where they suddenly notice that many of the surrounding people have various physical deformities. The caretaker turns out to be a cyclops. For Lucy, this is strange, but Maximus does not understand her concern. Later, the caretaker confesses to Lucy that they accept people from the surface, which surprises the girl since this was strictly forbidden in her shelter. But when she asks about the forbidden level they were advised not to visit, the caretaker immediately ends the conversation. Maximus finds a room where a nuclear block is installed, powering the entire underground. The leader hands him an electronic key to his personal compartment and suggests he rest a bit. The boy enters, and upon entering, he is amazed to see a basket filled with various delicacies and things he has never seen before. For the first time in his life, he takes a real shower, puts on a robe and slippers, and indulges in unknown products. Meanwhile, Lucy finds a room where the entire history of the Californian Republic is vividly described. It turns out that life here was revived in 2142 but was destroyed in 2277. Lucy is horrified, wondering who needed a new war and why. But then all the shelter inhabitants hear a sound signal and head to the designated place. Meanwhile, a ghoul is caught by the so-called new president of the territory, who owned a supermarket trading in organs, and the ghoul is blamed for its destruction. However, he calmly asks for a needle and thread to sew his finger back on and asks for directions to find Moldover. But the president orders the ghoul to be killed. The ghoul has to destroy the new law enforcers and search for the woman himself. Lucy comes with everyone to a room, in the center of which stands an altar with burning candles. People begin to sing something, moving their hands, and Lucy gradually falls into a trance, supporting the others. Unexpectedly, people start to undress, which shocks Lucy. A bowl goes around, from which everyone takes some powder and smears their faces, and suddenly Lucy realizes with horror that it is the ashes of the deceased. In another bowl there is blood. People call to the Mother of Flame, who must save them, and an image of Moldover unfolds above their heads. A frightened Lucy runs to Maximus and urges him to run away quickly, but the boy has just found himself in such paradisiacal conditions and does not want to leave. So Lucy heads to the forbidden level. She enters a laboratory where apparently some genetic experiments on people were conducted. The girl is horrified as she examines the gruesome exhibits and notices glass cryocapsules containing human bodies. But then the lights turn on and a man in a white coat enters. Lucy hides, but he hears a noise, follows it, and finds the girl. Lucy fights, but the men who arrive seize her and drag her to the upper level. Meanwhile, the ghoul arrives at the digger's house, whose eldest son knows the location of Moldover. The frightened man orders the boy to tell everything he knows, and he admits that the woman can be found at the observatory. But when the ghoul is about to leave, the boy tries to kill him and pays with his life for it. At the same time, the shelter leaders shame Lucy as they had given her refuge, fed her, and healed her friend, but the girl is furious because she has seen what they do to people. Then they show her the complete recording of the attack on the laboratory of the very monster that almost devoured her too. It was the first inhabitants of the shelter who experimented on people, turning them into monsters. They are only trying to alleviate the pain of those who survived. The fact is that each shelter specializes in some experiment, and Lucy just doesn't know this. Nevertheless, she must be punished for her disobedience. The girl is led away, which Maximus sees. Thaddeus makes a stop to rest and realizes that his leg is in very bad condition. A dog bothers him, and he locks it in a metal box, then sets off to find a radio tower to contact the Brotherhood. At this time, the inhabitants of the shelter sentence Lucy to exile to the surface. Moreover, they supply her with a stock of food. The girl is stunned, as this is exactly what she wanted. Nevertheless, in her last words, she asks them to allow her friend to stay. But then Maximus appears in knight's armor, into which he has inserted the nuclear block he just stole. He scatters the men when the girl stops him, as they are letting her go anyway. They go up to the surface, and learning that he stole the nuclear block, Lucy convinces him to return it, as the shelter cannot survive without energy. They drop the block down, and Lucy, moved, calls him a good person. Then he confesses that he allowed a knight to perish and took his armor, so he is not a good person at all, but he really wants to go with her. Thaddeus is caught up by a man who calls himself a doctor and promises to fix his leg. He takes the boy to an abandoned clinic where, in exchange for a nuclear block, he gives him a potion that, when drunk, Thaddeus ecstatically sees his leg heal. Meanwhile, the ghoul finds the locked dog that Thaddeus left behind, and it leads him on Thaddeus's trail. At the same time, the boy reaches the radio station, around which traps are set that tear those who come too close to pieces. Thaddeus sends a signal to the Brotherhood and, waiting for their arrival, chats with the radio station owner about music. Then Maximus and Lucy appear. The girl asks for the scientist's head, the boy accidentally steps on a trap and an arrow pierces his neck. But strangely, he does not think of dying, and then Maximus realizes that he has become a zombie. Thaddeus is upset. He should not have trusted the unfamiliar doctor, but now the path to the Brotherhood is closed for him, as they would kill him immediately. At that moment, copters appear on the horizon. Maximus suggests to Titus to give him the scientist's head and run, and the boy takes this opportunity. Then Maximus gives the head to Lucy and picks up a head of some unfortunate lying nearby, torn apart in a trap. He asks the girl to run, and she kisses him and promises to wait in shelter 33. Some inhabitants of shelter number 33 begin to receive notifications about relocation to the neighboring block. Seizing the opportunity, Norman enters the caretaker system, deceitfully gains access to shelter 31, and heads there. The arriving servants take Maximus and bring him to the camp. The boy hands over the head he obtained to the leader and confesses that his knight perished. After finding nothing in the head, they sentence him to death. And then his friend confesses that she had cut her own leg because she was scared to go searching. Maximus shouts that he knows where to find the real head. The leader orders him to be released, and everyone prepares for a performance. At that time, Lucy reaches the observatory where her father is sitting in a cage. Sitting at the table, Moldaver greets the girl, who is horrified to see a dried-up, yet still living mummy seated next to the hostess. The girl is willing to give her the head in exchange for freedom. Moldaver extracts a vial from the head and offers to listen to the real story of her father. Although he begs his daughter not to listen, the woman begins her story. Meanwhile, Norman finds a robot with a human brain in the secret shelter 31, which immediately tries to inject him with something. The boy barely dodges the crazy machine. Moldaver's story transports Lucy to the distant pre-war years when actor Cooper, agitated by his wife's talks of an impending nuclear war, decides to follow her. He comes to her work and listens to a corporate council meeting through a bug he planted on his wife. Billionaires discuss the decline in sales worldwide. Then they move on to the topic of shelters. Someone does not understand their necessity, arguing that if anyone survives on the surface, those emerging from the shelters will simply be killed. They counter that one could live underground for centuries, as there are vast reserves. Time is their main weapon. One could simply outlive the rest. A debate erupts among the corporate leaders, interrupted by Cooper's wife. She thinks primarily of her daughter and wants to secure the best future for her. In the future, Norman reaches a room where rows of cryo capsules stand with the names of those who slept in them, including all the wardens, his father among them. The action returns to the past, where Cooper's wife reveals that over 100 shelters have been built across America, so each of them could fulfill their wildest dreams. In the future, the robot explains to Norman that all these people were selected for their creative thinking and positivity. They are the country's best gene pool, destined to revive the nation after the surface is cleansed. In the past, the debate flares up again, as destroying so many people is not easy. Then Cooper's wife suggests to start the war themselves. A nuclear war is a tragedy, but also the greatest opportunity to start anew, because then there will be no one left to fight. They will become monopolists of the entire world. At this point, Cooper is distracted by a young man who would like to get an autograph, and this is Lucy's young father. In the present, Moldaver explains that the man has lived for a very long time. He is part of the corporation that orchestrated all this horror, but he never spoke about it to his wife. She was very smart. It was she who discovered that something was draining water from the shelter. She realized that civilization had returned, but her husband mocked her. Then the woman took the children and fled. They found a wonderful city, but her father came with his men and burned it down. Lucy brought Moldaver the cold fusion she developed and stolen by corporations, infinite energy with which life can be revived. Lucy sees a pendant on the mummy's neck that belonged to her mother and realizes what happened to her. Her father begs her not to believe Moldaver, but the girl demands that he give her the synthesis code. He relents and provides the numbers. The woman leaves for the laboratory to start the cold fusion process. Meanwhile, the robot informs Norman that it will not let him leave after what he has learned. At the same time, Lucy's father pleads with her to open the cage and return home, just as an alarm sounds and Brotherhood copters appear over the observatory, opening fire on the people below. Knights and their assistants descend to the ground and engage in battle with the observatory's defenders. Maximus rushes forward, searching for Lucy, while the knights wreak havoc around. Soon the knights burst inside the building, where they are suddenly stopped by a ghoul. It turns out he too once wore armor and knows their vulnerabilities. Thus he easily shoots the Iron Knights, remaining unharmed himself. At this time Lucy cries, torn between her father's pleas to come home and the terrible situation of her mother. But then at the room's threshold, a wounded knight falls, followed by Maximus. He opens the cage and rushes to Lucy. However, the girl confesses that it was her father who destroyed his wonderful city. Her father, meanwhile, dons armor and throws Maximus aside, knocking him unconscious. The girl pulls out a gun, but then the ghoul enters the room. When he learned Lucy's surname, he couldn't believe that this was the same guy from the corporation. He had waited over 200 years to find out where his family was. Lucy's father activates jet engines and flees. However, it turns out that this was exactly what the ghoul needed, as the man leaves a trail that can easily be followed to the place where the world's rulers are hiding, those who orchestrated the nuclear war. He urges Lucy to come with him. Then Lucy shoots the mummy, says goodbye to the unresponsive Maximus, and follows the ghoul. At the same time, an injured Moldover returns to the room where Maximus regains consciousness. She has activated the nuclear synthesis, and now people have infinite energy. A stunned Maximus watches as surviving lanterns light up over the ruins of the city, while Moldover smiles and dies. The Brotherhood members who rush in think their comrade killed the woman and celebrate Maximus as a future knight. Meanwhile, the ghoul and Lucy follow the trail of her father, who heads through the desert to a distant city. The series ends there. People often fantasize about immortality, but what if a person could live for a few hundred years or thousands? What would an immortal look like? What would they do? How would they relate to family and religion? In 2007, director Richard Shankman attempted to explore these questions in the science fiction film The Man from Earth, and this fiction makes us contemplate the real. That's the case with Ja. There's a grave disorder. Is he serious? He is. The film begins with scenes of a 35-year-old man loading his belongings into the open bed of a pickup truck. Two cars approach his house. People step out of them. Dan, Sandy, Harry, and Edith. They are colleagues and friends of the main character, Professor John Oldman. They are puzzled. Why is he planning to leave and without saying goodbye? Dan jokes that he must be in a hurry to take over a chair at Stanford, and Harry shows a basket of food, regretting that they don't have enough time. Otherwise, they would have arranged something grand. Edith notices a painting near the car. She's in awe. It looks very much like a Van Gogh, but she's never seen it before. John says it's a gift from a friend. Edith is surprised. It looks like an authentic one. John invites his friends into the house. They ask him to tell the truth. Why is he leaving his home and 10 years of teaching? John responds that he can't stay in one place for long, but his friends don't believe it. It can be that he moves so frequently. He's only 35 and he hasn't aged a bit in the last 10 years. Any woman on the faculty would give anything to know the secret. At that moment, Professor of Archaeology Art Jenkins arrives with his student, Linda. He gives John a book about prehistoric caves as a memento and also wonders where John is heading. Again, John says that he just enjoys moving around and brings out an expensive bottle of whiskey. People become more cheerful and forget about the uncomfortable questions. They form a circle and wish him a long life and good luck. On the shelf, Dan finds a strange bone artifact. It's a flint knife, a silicon tool for carving wood and bone. The Cro-Magnons used it in the Paleolithic era. While the group examines the artifact, John suddenly asks, what do they think an Upper Paleolithic human would look like if they could have lived to the present time? Dan replies that, as Art's book says, he could be just like any of them, and if he had lived for centuries, he would have changed with each passing century, meaning that the Upper Paleolithic people had the same intelligence as modern humans, they just knew less. Linda is curious, according to the biologist, what would sustain his life. Biologist Harry says that it would require complete cell regeneration. It is believed that the human body is designed for a lifespan of around 190 years. Edith laments, as many would love to know the secret of eternal life. Harry responds that what is magic for one time is science for another. After all, Columbus and Copernicus were once considered mad. And then John reveals that he could have traveled with Columbus, but he isn't the adventurous type. Moreover, he was already convinced that Earth was round. However, back then he still believed that there was an edge somewhere that one could fall off. The friends give uncertain smiles, thinking it's a joke, right? But John denies it. Every 10 years or so, people start to notice that he doesn't age and he has to leave. The friends are puzzled. Is he saying he's a Cro-Magnon? John explains that at least for the last 4,000 years, since the time of Mesopotamia, he's been sure of it. In his first life, he lived to about 35 years old and became the leader of his tribe because they believed he was a sorcerer. He didn't even have to fight for it. But then fear arose and they banished him. People believed he was stealing their life force to remain young. He was pursued because he wouldn't die. That's how the habit of joining new tribes he encountered along the way emerged. At first, John thought something was wrong with him. Maybe he was evil and that's why he couldn't die. Then he thought he might be cursed, or on the contrary, blessed. Later, he believed there was some purpose to his existence, and now he thinks he simply came into being. His friends are intrigued. John's story is full of interest. Edith is curious again about the fate of the Van Gogh painting. And John tells them that Van Gogh gave him the painting when John was Jacques Born, a pig farmer. Van Gogh used to visit him, paint, and talk about how nature finds its reflection in art. Art asks, "Did you always leave?" John shrugs. Sometimes he created a new identity for the next 10 years. Sometimes he even posed as his own son. But a few times he got caught. He even spent a year in a Belgian prison in 1862 for forging state documents. His friends start to get annoyed. John seems to have an answer to everything except one. Why does he do it? And he answers, he just wanted them to say goodbye to him specifically. After this, those around him conclude that John has serious issues. He remembers about moving. He still needs to take the boxes. While the man is carrying his belongings, Harry tries to find hidden microphones or cameras. People just can't believe that what is happening is real. At the car, Sandy confesses her love to John. He says that she's not indifferent to him either. But now she understands what she's getting into, right? Because one day he'll be forced to leave. He cannot give her eternity. But she objects. What is eternity, and who has it? Her parents divorced even before she was born. Besides, there's death, illness, insurmountable circumstances. Nobody knows how much time they have, whether it's a lot or little. She loves him and will accept everything he can give her. John and Sandy return to the house. Their friends say that they still have more questions. For example, does he remember any of his native languages? The man replies that he remembers a little. Besides, they haven't changed much. And did he engage in cave painting? Yes, he knew a man named Daru who was excellent at his work. He painted animals that hunters hoped to kill and eat. Once, after an unsuccessful hunt, the leader knocked out all his teeth for failing with his magic. After that, someone had to chew his food for him. Eventually, he developed jawbone inflammation and they abandoned him. Then John headed east. It was at the beginning of the Bronze Age. He walked along trade routes and learned the languages of the places he visited. Everywhere there were myths about the creation of the world and new gods. He was a Sumerian for 2,000 years, then a Babylonian during Hammurabi's reign. For some time he sailed as a Phoenician. It seems he spent his whole life on the road and learned a few new tricks. He even staged his own death a couple of times. He made it to India and met Buddha, the most remarkable person he had ever encountered. Buddha taught John many things he had never pondered before. In the midst of the debate, Dr. Will Gruber arrives. The doctor says that there's absolutely no way for John to prove the truth of his story, and no way they could verify it. He's either their friend, or a caveman, or a liar, or a lunatic. The doctor is curious. In this extensive life being discussed, did he ever get sick? John answers affirmatively. Like everyone else, he had serious illnesses, perhaps pneumonia or other lung infections. He suffered from typhoid, yellow fever, and smallpox. He survived the bubonic plague, and it's even more horrifying than history tells. But he doesn't have any scars. Among the friends, a debate flares up, whether to believe John's stories or not. They contradict all their notions about nature. Dan is puzzled. A person with John's intellect would have studied a lot of things. John confesses he has 10 scientific degrees, including all those his friends have. He earned his biology doctorate at Oxford in 1840, but his achievements are just an excess of time, not brilliance. Suddenly, Dr. Will pulls out a gun. He asks John if he would survive if he is shot. But John never claimed he was immortal, just very old. The doctor is curious. What does John think about death? Is he afraid of it? John explains that ancient people thought about death, but they had a practical understanding. They stopped moving, fell, and never got up. Infections were incomprehensible. Aging was the biggest mystery. So at first, John thought that everyone around him was wrong. After all, they aged and died. And again, the friends ask, what is it like for a person when everyone they knew has died? The doctor asks John about his parents, but he says he only remembers glimpses. The doctor remarks that it's not surprising. He too remembers his father very vaguely. Will starts reasoning about what's fair and what's not. They will all die and he will keep on living. If that's true, it's not surprising that they might feel envy and even hatred. He accuses John. The others are outraged and try to stop the doctor, but he says that John is living an unjust life. Perhaps it's time for him to die. The doctor leaves, and then Harry informs everyone that Will's wife died yesterday, which is why he's so aggressive. John runs after his friend to apologize. Meanwhile, the others discuss John. The theory of illness comes up. John returns. The next question from his friends is whether there are others like him. The man admits that in the 17th century he met someone like him, and that person told him everything, confirming that he was just like John, but from a different time and place. They talked for 2 days and then parted ways. Edith asks if he believes in God. The friends become engaged as religious questions are close to everyone. Did he meet anyone from the Bible? Was he a part of religious history? Numerous theories are suggested. Edith is outraged, considering it blasphemy. John recounts that he once encountered Buddha and he liked what he heard. He had been contemplating the teachings for 500 years. Then he became Etruscan and infiltrated the Roman Empire. He didn't like how it turned into a massive killing machine. He went to the Middle East, thinking of passing on Buddha's teachings in a renewed form. He tried, but he was one dissident against Rome. Rome won, and the rest is well known. So John was Jesus? Yes, during the crucifixion he blocked the pain. He learned this technique in Tibet. He also slowed down bodily processes so much that they couldn't be detected. Everyone thought he died. They took him down from the cross and laid him in a cave. When he regained consciousness, he wanted to leave unnoticed, but a bunch of fanatics wouldn't let him do that. So he resurrected and headed to Central Europe. He can't prove it, he has no scars, and besides, they tied him down. But blood and nails look more convincing on icons. Edith is outraged. John deeply hurt her feelings. The friends start discussing religious questions. John says that he preached that Christ's teachings were about tolerance, brotherhood, and love. Life is here on earth, here and now. But then the talking serpent persuaded a woman to eat the apple, and everything went awry. Heaven and hell became tools for priests to rule with reward and punishment, trying to save souls that people never lost. John observes rituals, ceremonies, processions, genuflections, the moans of singers and choirs, and he thinks this is not what he meant. At this time, Dr. Will returns. The debates about religion, Christianity, and piety continue. The friends racked their brains. Was it the fabrication, a mental disorder, drugs? But they can't find a solution. John completely baffled the 4 scientists. He continues to explain that religion is not what is happening now. The church grew out of fairy tales. Even the name Jesus grew out of John. He never claimed to be the Son of God. He wanted to share knowledge. He did not walk on water or resurrect the dead. The friends gather to leave, although they are excited by his story. Edith pleads again to say that he's not Jesus, and she starts crying. The lights come on. Will demands that he admit that it was all a joke, and then John confesses that it was just a story. Their outrage knows no bounds. But John says that they themselves pushed him to this thought. They said he doesn't age. Edith saw Van Gogh, then found the chisel. They themselves bought into his game, and he couldn't resist seeing how they would react to his words. After all, he had such a splendid audience. an anthropologist, an archaeologist, an expert in Christianity, a psychologist, and a biologist. Linda, standing in the doorway, asks if the name Oldman is a play on words, old man. The infuriated people leave except for Will. He stays in the room and John sees his friends off. Sandy asks, what other telltale names did he come up with for himself? And John starts listing. John Political, John Hermit, and about 60 years ago when he was teaching at Harvard, he was John Thomas Party. Will's voice is heard. Wait, 60 years ago? John Party? John turns to him and says that his mother's name was Nola. Will initially denies every word, but in tears he confirms Nola was his mum. But he can't believe it, and he asks for the name of their dog. John names it Woofy, and he asks if she got married again. Will says he feels cold, and John pities the old man. He was always cold. Will tries to touch his face. His father had a beard, and John confirms that he always checked if it was real. Will collapses. An ambulance and police car arrive at the house. They carry Will's body on a stretcher, covering it with a sheet over his head. Everyone leaves. Sandy asks if he has seen his adult child die before. John shakes his head. He gets into the car and drives away from the house. Sandy looks at him. The car stops at the bend. Smiling, she walks towards it. The Man from Earth is a very ambiguous movie. However, it makes you wonder. It raises very complex questions about morality, ethics, and religion. It is fascinating to follow the flight of human thought and to think, what if? Hey guys, today I will tell you about the second season of the fantasy drama from 2020, Warrior Nuns, based on the series of comics of the same name by artist and writer Ben Dunn.
Is this our thing now?
While swimming in the pool, Ava recalls what has happened to her since she went from being a paralyzed simpleton to a warrior nun wielding a mystical halo. The girl's musings are interrupted by a phone signal reminding her of your duty. Once a member of the Order of the Cruciform Sword, she's now in a hurry for her regular job at the cafe. Arriving for her shift, Ava listens to customers talk about the explosion at the Vatican and rumors that it was Angel Adriel himself who broke out of the basement, proclaiming himself a mission. Miguel intervenes in the company's conversation, mocking the legends about angels and miraculous cure of the infected, calling Adriel an imposter. Left alone with Ava, Miguel tries to get her opinion, but the girl says she doesn't think about the subject at all, fearing that she might expose herself. A colleague asks Ava to go upstairs to her boss's office, and Beatrice also asks a friend to talk less to visitors about legends so as not to draw suspicion to herself. On her way home in the evening, Ava can't get away from the prophet fanatics handing out religious leaflets. One of them annoys the girl so much that she uses her power and pushes him aside. Meanwhile, in the monastery in Spain, having finished watching videos on social media with her friends, Camilla goes down to see Mother Superior. The woman instructs the girl to go to London. According to the order, one of the ministers is possessed by a demonic ghost. The girl agrees without any complaints, but Mother Superior sees that something is bothering her. Camilla confesses that there's no way she can come to terms with Mary's disappearance. Portugal. Drunken Father Vincent always walks looking over his shoulder, and it turns out that that's for a good reason. Out of nowhere he is attacked by Lilith, and the old man can only save his life by telling her that Mary is alive. The Bishop of the Vatican agrees to an audience with nun Yasmin Monet. The girl says that she's preparing an article about the lost Christian artifacts, but she immediately directs the conversation to rumors about Adriel and the attack on the Vatican. This changes the bishop's mood, but the nun keeps pushing, claiming that she has learned about a certain female order in the course of her investigation. To avoid spilling the beans, the priest ends the meeting, but Yasmin isn't upset. She has managed to hack into the network. Jillian sits by the archway, which has finally begun to come to life, but the field still hasn't stabilized and the girl can't get through the portal. Any attempt to use the portal ends up leaving burn marks on her hands. Christian is thrilled by her colleague's discoveries, but he guesses that she's only driven by a desire to find her son Michael, who has disappeared into another world. Christian asks Jillian to sign the renovation documents for the building he bought for the company, Arctech. After looking at the documents, the woman begins to doubt their contents, but deciding not to offend her friend with mistrust, she signs them. Ava continues her training by running over water, but at one point her strength leaves her and she falls. The girl admits to Beatrice that she's tired of sitting around while Adriel gains strength. However, her older friend reminds her that they have an uphill battle ahead of them. Christian arrives at the Vatican and declares that Jillian has given him full control of Arctech. He wants to merge the company with the church on condition that the bishop accepts the appearance of a new prophet, Adriel. The bishop realizes that the impostor has fooled yet another fanatic. Miguel comes back to the bar and confesses to the girl that he volunteers in the community of Samaritans fighting Adriel and they need the people like Ava. Mother Superior Susanna calls the bishop and asks the Vatican to intervene. Adriel is gaining strength and he has managed to fool hundreds of Catholics already. The priest believes that it is too early to sound the alarm. First, he should make a statement that Adriel is an impostor, and if that doesn't work, call on the Order of the Cruciform Sword for help. This conversation is overheard by Yasmin. She has just received a confirmation of her hunch. Vincent arrives at his residence and escorts Lilith inside, telling the guards that she's his friend. Ava convinces Beatrice to have some fun and have a couple of shots. The girls are having carefree fun. Meanwhile, at the Italian convent on her way to dinner, Mother Superior sees a gruesome picture. The bodies of the nuns in crimson puddles lie in the parish yard. At night, the nuns return home from the bar, and Ava notices Miguel, who is acting strangely. She decides to follow him and witnesses the guy getting beaten up by a crowd of fanatic hooligans. Ava helps her friend, and they are joined by Beatrice, who didn't really like the suspicious guy before. The young people tell her about the Samaritans, and the nun decides to accept Miguel's help in their fight against Adriel. Meanwhile, Mother Superior tries to warn the other monasteries where members of the order are based. However, the light bulbs on the map go out one by one, which means the warrior nuns are either destroyed or they leave their outposts. The company decides to sneak into the headquarters of Adriel followers, the firstborn sons. But seeing that the members of the sect are leaving with some cargo, the friends decide to follow them. Mother Superior orders Camilla to pack their things so they can hide and lay low as soon as possible. But suddenly the nuns notice that the light on the map has not gone out on the Madrid cell, which means there are still living members of the order out there. Father Vincent leads Lilith into the prison, promising that Mary is sitting in one of the cells. But as soon as the witch comes in sight, the priest locks the door behind her. On the other side, dozens of warriors come out at the girl, but Lilith easily dispatches them. The company watches as fanatics stack a prayer circle with a cross in the field and begin to pray. At this point, Ava's attention is attracted by a strange sound, and turning around, the girl sees a cloud of locusts rushing at them. On their way back, the friends try to explain what they have seen. And seeing how the girls are calm about everything, Miguel suspects something is wrong. Ava has to confess that they are the nuns of the order, but he takes it as a joke. Left alone, the girls decide that everything that is happening is a biblical execution reproduced by Adriel. Mother Superior and Camilla fly to Madrid and look for the headquarters of the order, which is housed in a flower store. From the scattered flowers, it is clear that something terrible has happened here as well. Yasmin confesses that she summoned Mother Superior to show her the bodies of the dead sisters. The nuns try to find out how Yasmin knew about them, but she says she can only reveal the truth to the warrior nun. Miguel comes to Ava's work and invites her to interrogate one of the firstborns they took. To sneak away, the girl cuts her arm, but the wound immediately disappears, much to Miguel's surprise. Beatrice asks her friend to stay out of it. The Samaritans have illegally kidnapped a man, and they shouldn't get involved. But Ava stubbornly does her own thing. Yasmin suggested the nuns take up residence in her room, but not wanting to risk it, the women choose their own hiding place and put the stranger to sleep so that she won't see the path they take to get there. Meanwhile, Lilith escapes from the prison and arrives at her mother's house. Miguel brings his new friends to the Samaritan headquarters, and when the boys begin interrogating the prisoner, Ava sees the devil in him. Father Vincent arrives at the main square, and seconds later, locusts appear there. The townspeople become scared. Suddenly, Adriel appears and saves the terrified people, thus earning a new addition to the army of fans. Even the priests from the Vatican begin to believe in Adriel's power. The bishop speaks with his subordinates, demanding that the impostor not be glorified. The mother rebukes Lilith for losing the battle for the halo and for failing to live up to her hopes by losing her place in the Order of the Cruciform Sword. Yasmin comes to her senses and tells the nuns that she grew up in a family that helps the order. And now the girl must find the owner of the halo, Ava, and give her her secret. Looking at Ava, the prisoner recognizes her as the owner of the halo and demands that she return it to its true owner, Adriel. Beatrice knocks the chatty kid out, but he breaks the ropes and frees himself. The demon proves to be very strong, and the warrior nuns cannot defeat him until Ava activates her halo and banishes the entity out of the boy. Beatrice hurries to get her friend out of the way to avoid any more questions. Adriel shows up at the bishop's office and offers to join forces, admitting that the boy is indeed the son of God. But just as the priest refuses and asks the madman to leave, Adriel displays a couple of tricks demonstrating his power. The prophet leaves, but his offer still stands. Lilith comes to Dr. Jillian for help and asks her to examine the scales that have appeared on her shoulder. While sitting in Dr. Jillian's office, the nun sees an emergency call from the Sisters of the Order, but she refuses to go to Madrid. While packing to escape again, Ava and Beatrice quarrel, but they are interrupted by a signal on her older friend's chest. She tells a student that they have been summoned to Madrid. The second message arrives with news from Lilith that the Order has lost Mary. Vincent shows Adriel the signal and instructs the old man to join the women. Despite the gravity of the situation, Ava is excited about her trip to Madrid. Finally, the girls find the flower store where Mother Superior has left a movie ticket for them. The nuns have to scramble to avoid falling into the hands of the hunters. On the street, the girls spot a tail and have to get rid of it, but in an alleyway they are awaited by Vincent, who puts Beatrice to sleep. The priest tries to convince Ava that Adriel is the true prophet and she should go with him to return the prophet's halo. But the girl takes to flight and manages to defeat the old man. The girls make it to the movie theater where they finally meet Camilla. The nun takes her friends to the hiding place, the cellar beneath the cinema, where old Mother Superior is already waiting for them. The old woman gets straight to the point. She tells the sisters about the attack on the Order and says that the time has come to do her duty. Yasmin comes out to the girls, and when Ava is beside her, the girl's pendant glows blue and she recognizes the warrior nun. Now Yasmin can reveal the secret of how to defeat Adriel. Jillian offers Lilith to cure the problem with a pass through the archway, but the girl realizes that the doctor needs it in order for her to find his son there. Yasmin tells the girls about the crown of thorns that can defeat the imposter. Meanwhile, traitors begin to appear in the Vatican, among those close to the bishop. As Yasmin continues talking about the crown, she reveals a secret. The thorny garment is not only a means of torture, it also disempowers the likes of Adriel. The only problem is that the wreath was stolen years ago and is now stored in a museum, but Ava doesn't see this as an obstacle and the girls go out on a tour. Disabling the cameras and distracting the guards, the nuns head for the exhibit. However, the only way to know that it's the right wreath is for Eva to touch it. Lilith makes up her mind, and wearing a special suit, she enters the archway, but a second later she is thrown back. She's shocked because she felt that she had been on the other side of the portal for almost 2 hours, and she was clearly not welcome there. The bishop goes down to the prison to visit the traitor and learn from him how Adriel creates the punishments of heaven. To make the prisoner more talkative, the priest tries medieval torture methods on him. At first, the impostor's henchman tolerates the pain, assuring him that Adriel is the real son of God and all miracles are real. However, when the torture becomes unbearable, he admits that the prophet is collaborating with Arctech and the company uses its technology to create illusions. Lilith tries to understand why someone threw her out, and Jillian promises to deal with it next time. But the girl has no intention of entering the archway again, and she makes that clear to the doctor. After the conversation, Lilith disappears, forgetting the cross in the office. At night, the girls return to the museum to retrieve the crown. Mother Superior eliminates the guard, and the group of nuns sneaks in, sending old camera footage to the security monitors and disabling the laser alarms. Using the halo, Ava takes the crown, but nothing happens to it, and her friends ask Yasmin to help. Jillian decodes the tape from Lilith's camera, and as she speeds up, she sees someone's face on it. While the nuns are searching for the real wreath, Camilla notices that there is someone else in the museum beside them. Ava finally finds the artifact, but at that moment Camilla sees Adriel, and Vincent appears in front of the warriors and puts the crown on the girl's head, thereby depriving her of her superpowers and taking her with him. While Vincent is carrying Ava, the girl has terrible visions. She finally regains consciousness. Before leaving the exhausted girl in a dark alleyway, Vincent promises to pray for her before Adriel destroys her. But suddenly, Miguel comes to the girl's aid. By some miracle, he also happens to have superpowers. He says that explanations can wait, and having dealt with the priest, Miguel and Ava run away. Lilith comes to Adriel and, showing him her crusted hands, asks for his help. The nuns load Vincent into a car and drive off in search of Ava, shaking the cops on the way. The young people are finally safe, and Miguel returns Ava's crown and admits that he was sent from the other side of the arch to protect her. As they talk, a crowd of primitives in gas masks passes them, and Ava guesses that the new punishment awaits the city. In the meantime, the nuns get stuck on the road because of a flat tire. Miguel leads Ava to the gates of a cemetery, assuring her that he knows a way to destroy Adriel. All the while, the girl keeps seeing terrible visions, but she tries not to pay attention to them. After stealing a food delivery car, the nuns drive on, and Camilla recalls that the entire company has been hungry for a long time. After rummaging through the shelves, the girl finds something they can refresh themselves with: unusually shaped cakes that go down well with the sisters. Jillian arrives at the building she recently bought, and in the center the doctor sees a ritual cross and sectarians. Christian is also among them. Jillian asks Christian to explain what he has been doing all this time with her company and the building. Instead, Christian begins to talk about the all-powerful Adriel, who will soon conquer the whole world. Beatrice arrives at the cemetery looking for her friend. But the gas Adriel sprays as part of the next execution makes her scared. The girl removes a gas mask from one of the firstborns. Miguel and Ava daringly walk into Adriel's sect's church, and the two witness a ritual in which a demon possesses a teenager. Ava wonders how to stop all of this, but Miguel asks her to protect the crown and steps forward to take the hit. The guy's plan works. He lets himself be possessed by the demon, and then by painting in blue, he banishes it to show the sectarians what's really going on in the church. Mother Superior leads Vincent out of the car and into the woods to finish him off. But the woman doesn't have the strength to shoot him, so she simply pushes him into a ravine and inflicts some mutilation. Beatrice arrives at the church just as the commotion begins. Some trying to escape and some trying to expel Miguel, thinking that he's the one who brought the devil. The three of them are trapped, and hugging her friends, Ava activates the halo. Adriel tells Lilith that their destinies are intertwined, and they will conquer the world together. Feeling important for the first time, the girl believes the imposter. Miguel, Ava, and Beatrice manage to escape from the church, but now they risk being caught by the police or other fanatics, so the guy offers a safe haven, his house. Adriel tells Lilith about Ariella, the girl he loved and to whom he gave his halo. The prophet dreamed that together they would create a religion based on truth. Mother Superior also tells the nuns this story. When the angel first came to Earth 1,000 years ago, he created an underground upside-down church. But Ariella prayed for a long time to find the truth, and God answered the girl. He sent her a crown that was to stop the imposter. Adriel and Mother Superior simultaneously tell this story, but each does it differently. The nun thinks that Ariella saw evil in the prophet, while Adriel tells Lilith that the crown corrupted the beloved and she betrayed him. Ariella put the crown on the prophet's head, and he was imprisoned in a cave in which he spent 1,000 years, except that the girl paid for it with her own life. And Mother Superior warns Ava that no one has ever managed to defeat Adriel and survive. The company arrives at Jillian's house, from which Lilith's signal was last heard, but the doctor asks the guests to leave. Miguel then asks to tell the woman that her son is here. Seeing the boy, who is much older than the day they last met, Jillian falls on his neck and cannot hold back her tears. The nuns try to find out from the doctor where Lilith has gone to, but Jillian cannot answer the question. The only thing the doctor can tell is that the girl's physical and mental health has severely deteriorated. Mother Superior goes outside to talk on the phone. The bishop asks the abbess to come to a secret meeting where further struggles with Adriel will be decided. Miguel, who is really Michael, comes into his childhood room and looks at the drawings he drew when Adriel manipulated him. Camilla hears someone's voice again and is caught in a frightened state by Beatrice. Camilla confesses that after being stroked on the back by one of the sisters in the convent, the girl is suffering from severe headaches, and her friend suggests that she have a little examination. Jillian recalls the day Michael ran into the portal. Once on the other side, the boy wandered alone for a long time, and then the shining angels took him to Rhea, the Lord of Adriel. It was she who trained the angel and then sent him to Earth to stop the evil. The abbess and Yasmin arrive at the meeting with the priests where everyone is already gathered. The archbishop begins talking about Adriel, calling him a wolf in sheep's clothing. The charlatan himself, meanwhile, continues to tell Lilith about himself, complaining about his life in the dungeon. Angel offers to show his friend his difficult fate, and to do so he places burning fingers over her eyes. Jillian shows his son the face that ended up on her tape, and from what he sees, the boy faints. Beatrice does a scan of Camilla's spine, and during the procedure the girls are being frank with each other. One of the nuns confesses that she has doubts about Adriel, but if he really turns out to be the prophet, all the scriptures will lose their significance. The picture shows a cross inserted into Camilla's spine, which is what is causing the hallucinations. Unfortunately, Beatrice cannot remove it. Adriel asks Lilith forgiveness for the pain, but he convinces her to open her eyes, and when the burns come off, the girl sees demons and a completely different world, which she calls the truth. Beatrice finds Ava in the courtyard as she's practicing putting a wreath on the monument's head, but the halo goes off again and the girl falls. The nun tries to support a friend and assures her that they will defeat Adriel no matter what it takes. Christian meets Vincent in Arctac and reminds him that in just 2 days they will give the world to their master. A discussion breaks out at the meeting of priests. There are those who doubt Adriel's con game and believe that one cannot punish an angel without understanding his true purpose. At this, Bishop Francesco reveals to his colleagues the secret of Arctac, urging them to understand that all the punishments sent were nothing more than a trick. Mother Superior intervenes in the dispute, telling of the destruction of the members of the order. Apparently, the bishop and abbess have succeeded in convincing the crowd, but suddenly it transpires that half of those assembled are traitors, having defected to Adriel's side. A massacre of fanatics begins in the hall, and Mother Superior succeeds in removing only Francesco and Yasmin. The trio hides in the hotel gymnasium, but they can no longer get out, and Mother Superior calls Camille for help. Ava, Beatrice and Michael arrive at the inn, but the firstborns prove to be too many and the trio fears they cannot win. After examining the photograph of the cross in the spine and noticing a note from Beatrice, Jillian looks at Camilla through the glasses while she prays and sees the same waves that create the portal. The doctor guesses that Adriel is using the power of prayer to gain strength. Having heard the call, surviving nuns of the order arrive at Jillian's house. Ava takes the crowd of firstborns away, and Beatrice and Michael deal with the remaining 2. The abbess commands her subjects to leave, but the bishop refuses, determined to expose Adriel to the full. Running from her pursuers, Ava runs through a wall and finds herself outside at a great height. The girl's halo shuts down again and she falls. Beatrice mourns her friend, but she opens her eyes and the artifact begins to glow again. Bishop surrenders to the traitors, hoping they will lead him to Adriel. The imposter angel himself, meanwhile, tells Lilith how much they will accomplish together after they cleanse the world with pain. The master's trust inspires the girl so much that she grows wings. And that concludes episode 5. Come back tomorrow for the next episode. Guys, if you don't want to miss anything, don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
Welcome to the show.
A man is running through a dark forest in Ireland. He seems frightened despite constantly encountering signs with the words "point of no return" and various numbers, indicating either directions or distances to something. However, he fails to escape. Darkness quickly envelops the surroundings, a flock of birds flies overhead, and he falls into a pit. In the next moment, an invisible force grabs him and drags him away. Elsewhere in the country lives an artist named Minna, who works in a pet store. One day, her boss asks her to deliver a rare parrot to a zoo in a neighboring city, and Minna agrees. She takes the bird home for the night. There, she tells the parrot that her mother died 15 years ago. Suddenly, the bird starts to respond. In the evening, Minna puts on a wig and goes to a bar where she introduces herself to a guy with a fictitious name, claiming to be a ballerina. In the morning, Minna apologizes to the parrot for her behavior, saying the real her would probably not be liked. Finally, the pair set off on their journey. On the way, her sister Lucy calls, reminding her that she has family and nieces who love and await her. Minna continues driving and eventually ends up on a road leading into an old dark forest. Unexpectedly, the car breaks down and stalls, and the connection also mysteriously cuts off. Taking the parrot's cage, Minna steps onto the road to seek help, but the forest is dark and empty. When she returns to where she left the car, the road is deserted. Mina continues to wander through the quickly darkening area, talking to the bird to keep herself cheerful and suggesting they name it Darwin. Suddenly, she notices a woman running past and decides to follow her. Mina catches up with her near a small forest cabin, and the woman, opening the door, orders her to come inside quickly if she wants to live. Naturally, Mina rushes into the cabin. The elderly woman is named Madeline. She has been living here for some time with two other young people, Ciara and Daniel. She immediately orders Mina to stand in front of a mirror because the watchers cannot enter inside but observe from outside, coming every night after sunset. Standing by the mirror, Mina suddenly hears sounds like applause. Madeline confirms her suspicions. The watchers are applauding the appearance of a new object. In the morning, Mina announces that she intends to leave. Although the others assure her it's impossible, she heads into the forest. Madeline catches up with her, explaining that the forest causes hallucinations, but it is possible to survive here. The signs scattered throughout the forest mark the boundary from which a person can reach the cabin before dark. But if you go beyond the boundary, there will be no way back. They were made by a man named the Professor, but where he is now, no one knows. That night, Daniel puts on a show for the watchers, presenting them with the newcomer, but they ask her to behave as usual. Meanwhile, Ciara turns on the music and dances, as she does every evening. Mina, on the other hand, finds discs with recordings of Love Search TV shows. In the morning, she and Ciara go to gather medicinal herbs because her missing husband asked the girl to take care of Daniel. Then the man went to search for a way out and disappeared. Ciara explains that recently they found strange burrows scattered throughout the forest. That's where the watchers go during daylight hours. She believes she has been in the cabin for almost 5 months. Later, Madeline announces the safety rules. Never leave at night, never open the doors for anyone, always try to stay in the light. Strange life begins with entirely identical days. Mina watches endless shows and often stands staring into the mirror. One day she knocks on it, and immediately there is a knock on the door. Madeline orders everyone to freeze and everything stops. The next day she and Daniel go hunting. The boy tells her that Madeline used to work at the university, so she considers herself a know-it-all. But she has been living here the longest. Daniel himself has been in the cabin for 8 months, but has never seen anyone. After listening to the boy, Mina convinces Daniel to help her explore a burrow. Using a rope, Mina descends, explores it, and finds old items, newspapers, toys, pieces of electronics, and an old bicycle, which she ties to the rope and sends up. But then strange sounds, similar to those heard at night outside the cabin walls, echo from the darkness. Mina screams and the rope falls at her feet. Climbing out into the light, Mina leaves the dangerous place, and they calmly examine the items. With the bicycle, it might be possible to escape from here, but Madeline has a rather strange reaction to this. Meanwhile, Daniel manages to assemble a surveillance system from the found pieces of electronics and installs a camera by the door. At night, everything goes as usual. Ciara dances when there is a knock on the door, and Daniel suggests that a person has come. Madeline forbids opening it, but they hear the voice of Ciara's husband. Ciara tries to prove that it is John by asking him what book she is reading, but he does not answer. Although they bought this book together on his advice, the man begs to be saved from death. Ciara asks to look into the camera, but when he leans towards it, something drags him into the forest. Immediately there is a knock on the mirror stronger than ever before. Madeline stands in front of the people, as if shielding them, and the knocking stops. In the morning, Madeline throws the bicycle into the burrow, demanding that they no longer break the rules. Later, Mina recalls her sister and mother, who invited the girls for a car ride. The weather was beautiful and Mina opened the window. Her mother asked her to close it because the wind was bothering her, but Mina didn't listen, mimicking her mother, who got distracted from the road, and the tragedy happened, for which Mina still feels guilty. Winter soon arrived. The days grew shorter, the nights colder, and food became increasingly scarce. Quarrels began to flare up among the cabin's inhabitants. One day, Ciara left for the forest. Mina caught up with her, and she confessed that she felt John was real. She runs to the house from where Daniel's screams are heard, angry with Madeline and Mina, refusing to let them inside. The women hide under a tree and soon see lanky, spider-like monsters emerging from the forest, approaching the cabin window, and making terrible shrill noises. The watchers stare at Daniel and Ciara while Mina and Madeline wait for them to leave so they can return to the cabin. When they do, the women rush to the door and beg to be let in. Daniel refuses, and then Mina tells him about her guilt towards her mother. She asks him to understand that he will suffer all his life, realizing that he is responsible for the death of people. The doors open. The four of them immediately stand in front of the mirror, hoping to convince the watchers that they are in place. Madeline admits that she tried to protect them from certain things. She used to teach history and mythology, and unlike them, came here voluntarily. Only here did she realize how dangerous this place was. Once she hunted alone and saw herself at sunset. Not an exact copy, but very similar. The Watchers are an ancient species with many names: changelings, winged ones, fairies. They study people to impersonate them, and they will never let them leave. Knocks and the voices of the cabin's inhabitants are heard outside. Then Daniel finds a hatch in the floor, which they didn't even know existed. Descending, they discover a well-fortified and equipped living space filled with food and equipment. Mina turns on an old computer, and a video recording shows the face of the professor, whose real name was Rory Kilmartin. He was the first to study the Watchers and tried to learn about their origins. In 1979, the scientist found this place, which he called Wonderlamp. Every evening, the Watchers came to his window and studied him. For many years before this, the professor's colleagues laughed at him, not believing his tales. Then he built this bunker, using the labor of men from nearby remote villages. He chose the lonely or those with bad habits so that their disappearance would not attract much attention, as every evening he convinced them to have dinner outdoors. Hiding inside, he watched the Watchers deal with them. Thus this bunker was built on blood. One day, a Watcher appeared before him in the form of a girl with red hair. She was very different from the others, as if she were unique and looked curious and harmless. That's when he realized that if he unlocked the secrets of the fairies, he might even conquer death. He did the impossible, lured this girl into a cage and began experiments on communication, trying to befriend her. She changed form, sometimes turning into a frightening creature with long arms, but seemed to listen to him. Gradually, she became close and understandable to him, but now the professor realized he had achieved nothing significant and was ready to end his life. He hid a boat by the river, and this is the only way out. Just follow the birds. He asked the survivor to go to his university office and destroy all the documents found there, and now he will go to her and stay here forever. In the last recording, they see Kilmartin climbing up. Gunshots are heard, and then all is quiet. Realizing that this is their last night in the forest, Sierra turns on the music and invites Daniel to dance, but he seems upset about leaving. He says his family is dysfunctional and he has nowhere to return to. Then the girl offers to let him stay with her for a while until they find him a good occupation and place to live, as they have become good friends. In the morning, the group sets out to escape, guided by the signs and Mina's parrot, whom she asked to lead them. Soon they reach a massive stone disc in the ground, covering the entrance to a huge tunnel. Madeline explains that this is where the last representatives of the ancient fairy race were locked up, who were once very friendly with humans. After many centuries, they managed to surface, but now the friendship has turned into hatred. They stay here because they are held by magic, so they need to run far away. They walk all day. Dusk falls, but there is no river or boat in sight. It starts raining, and they fall into despair when they see huge flocks of birds flying in one direction. They run after them and reach the river. The women rush to the boat when Daniel hears screams behind him and sees John. He returns for him, rejoicing that the man survived, but it turns out to be a changeling. The women scream, begging Daniel to run, but he doesn't hear and dies at the hands of the Watcher, who then takes on his form while Madeline, Mina, and Sierra sail down the river. The women wake up in the boat and see that they have returned to civilization. They stop a bus and ride to the city, listening to music and only now realizing that it's over. Later, Mina goes to the university where Kilmartin worked, posing as his niece to enter his office and fulfill his last request. There, she finds more documents, photos, and a recording in which he discusses the fairies and the fact that there are still half-blood children in the world. Mina finds a stack of photos and, looking at them, seems very surprised. In the evening, Mina goes to Sierra's house, showing a photo of Madeline from the professor's belongings, explaining that it is his wife who died several years ago. So the Madeline they lived with in the cabin was a special fairy capable of moving during the day. It was she whom Kilmartin caught. He couldn't kill her, and she took on Madeline's form to return to civilization. Then a car pulls up to the house, and the real Sierra gets out, while the one she's talking to is actually a fairy. Realizing she has been exposed, the fairy knocks Mina out and changes shape again, turning into Daniel. They just want to live like other species, but due to human hatred, they are forced to stay underground. The fairy turns into Kilmartin and goes to Mina. In the house, the fairy transforms into her and prepares to kill the girl. But Mina says that there are others like her somewhere because she is half human and acknowledges that it was unfair of humans to banish the fairies from their world. The fairy softens and spreads her wings, admitting that Mina might be right, and she flies away. Mina revives Ciara. Later she reunites with her twin sister Lucy, finally forgiving herself for their mother's death. She tells her about her experience, admitting that she still sees Madeline appearing in the forms of other people. Her nieces arrive to show Mina a drawing of her and Darwin, whom she still keeps as a pet. Meanwhile, outside, a girl with red hair appears, looking at their apartment windows and taking on the form of a girl with a strange face. This is probably not a horror movie, but rather a scary bedtime story when a child doesn't want to sleep and asks for something frightening. Everything builds up slowly and tastefully, but the ending unfolds somewhat mundanely, although mysteriously.
Hey guys, today we have a recap of the next episodes of the show. Magne and Vidar are lying unconscious on the pier when an ambulance pulls up. One of the paramedics rushes to Magne with a defibrillator and begins to administer aid. After receiving the shock, Magne instantly regains consciousness and emits a powerful wave that throws the man several meters away. While the second medic tries to help his buddy, Magne approaches Vidar's body. Vidar opens his eyes and whispers the words of a threat. Magne will die before the new moon comes. The lad runs away. At this time in the nursing home, one of the residents, Wotan Wagner, complains to the orderly Halvor about the broken wheelchair. Magne runs into the mountains. He is still shaken by the battle and turns to the bird flying above, blaming it for everything that has happened to him. Suddenly, Magne finds himself in the netherworld, and before him stands the ancient sorceress Volva, who takes the form of Isolde. She reminds him that he must now obtain weapons and find friends, for the other gods will surely come to his aid. Volva asks him not to come here because the giants might kill her too. Then she scoops up something from the glowing bowl and blows it in the guy's face. Magne is immediately alone on the mountain. Annoyed, Vidar rushes to his house and tells Ren and Saxa about the battle that took place. In the meantime, a group of young people are hanging out at a table in a street cafe when Magne comes running to them looking for the cashier. No one knows where she is, but everyone raves about Laurit's speech at the feast. Fjord then returns home and announces that he has not killed Gry. Not only that, he's going to leave home and live with the girl he loves. The boy does not want to take part in the coming battle. When he arrives at Gry's house, he announces his separation from his family. Magne reminds Lauritz of the stories of Ragnarok, but the brother does not take these ancient stories seriously. To prove his new identity, Magne bends a metal bat in front of his brother. Lauritz asks for time to think over what he has said. The next day, the head of the Adda police appears on TV and announces that an investigation has begun into Utul Industries, for which a well-known expert is coming to town. Lauritz is watching the broadcast, devouring food. Suddenly, Turid arrives, and she's surprised by his son's voraciousness. In his room, Magne observes an obvious change in his appearance. His muscles are getting bigger, and he's getting even stronger. Later, Turid invites the boys to celebrate their father's birthday and shows them a photo of them together. The family goes to their father's grave, where Lauritz makes the statement that the father would obviously be proud of a son who looks like a woman and uses makeup. Here, Magne looks like his father, but Lauritz looks like he's from a different family. Turid smoothes over the unpleasant conversation. On their way home, they meet Erich, and he informs them that by the school board's decision, Magne can return to school. At that moment, Turid asks for help. The car won't start. So Magne pushes the car to the car repair shop, where they are greeted by Harry, the mechanic. And there, Magne gets a clue where he can get the hammer. In the meantime, Vidar is watching a report on TV about the barrels found, while the women take the ancient weapon down. Saxa is annoyed by her refusal to take her in, since she is a member of the family. Agreeing to this, Vidar takes her to the factory and shows her the production when suddenly police arrive. Vidar acts arrogant and defiant, but the girl smooths over her father's behavior at a crucial moment, apologizing for the problems she has caused and promising to do everything she can to solve them. Her father has to admit that she's right. Meanwhile, Magne makes a drawing of Thor's hammer. Turid in the meantime comes to the store and apologizes to Venke for the words she spoke, and the woman asks her to inform his son that he will meet the god on the bridge, for which he must remember Volva's ancient prophecy. Hearing these words, Magne runs to the bridge. He memorizes the first words of the prophecy and tries to read them to passers-by. But everyone just passes by, except Iman, who takes Wotan out for a walk. Magne reads a few lines and the girl continues the text. They go home to Magne and the girl tells him how Wenke activated her powers, saying she was special. Then she tells him to find the chief warrior and help him. Meanwhile, Lauritz arrives at the grill cafe and meets the waiter. He unmistakably identifies the guy as gay and shows his sympathy. Meanwhile, Magne tries to find out about Iman's powers, but the girl can't recall anything supernatural. Back at home, Lauritz shares his hopes with his mother and informs her that young people are coming over tonight to have a party. At this moment, they hear very distinctive noises from Magne's room. Mother and son smile. Apparently, Magne has found himself a girlfriend. But it turns out that the boy, demonstrating his strength, has to put Iman on a chair and lift her up with one hand while she bangs on the ceiling and screams. In the evening, fun reigns in the turret house, to which Gry and Fjord also come. And Iman finally finds her power. She can make anyone do what she wants. And she demonstrates it on one of the guys who, at her command, brings her a drink by moving on his knees. She seems to be the embodiment of the goddess of love and fertility, Freya. Lauritz's new mate never arrives and the distraught lad complains to his mother. He's just ugly. Tipsa Turid reveals the truth to her son. In the morning, Iman and Magne arrive at the workshop and the girl uses her powers to force Harry to make a hammer from Magne's drawing. In the meantime, Turid goes to Vidar and confesses to him that on the one night they once spent together, she became pregnant. And now is the time when Lauritz needs a man's support very much. And Vidar, thanks to woman. In the evening, on his way home, Magne sees Vidar embracing Lauritz. At night, Turid tries to justify herself to Lauritz. She has never regretted giving birth to him, and she won't mind if the boy gets to know his real father better, which Magne dislikes very much. In Jotunheim, Ran trains with her fighting bow, reminding Saxa of her spear. But the girl is completely immersed in the business of the factory. At this point, Vidar informs her of his newfound son, which causes Ran to object. Giants cannot have children by mortals, but Vidar cites fate. And Magne breaks the news to Iman. He then learns that the girl was born in Sri Lanka but grew up in a Norwegian family. She boasts that she can get anything she wants with her powers, which provokes Magne's condemnation. The powers were not given to get new clothes or cheat shopkeepers. At this point, Harry brings the hammer. Lauritz comes to Vidar and he offers to take a motorcycle ride. Meanwhile, Magne and Iman are going to test the hammer, for the real one must always return to Odin. But the hammer just takes off. Making a stop in the mountain, Vidar tries to ferret out something about Magne, but Lauritz gets it right away. Magne retrieves his hammer but cannot understand why it does not work. Meanwhile, Saxa continues to investigate the company's affairs and makes a statement to reporters. Meanwhile, a company of young people are sitting in a grill bar and watching the news. The guys are shocked by the admission that it's dangerous to drink tap water because that's what they were drinking. Fjord hears Saxa's apology and leaves. One of the girls suggests protesting against the U-Tools who have mucked up the fjord. Turid is writing a note to her sons to not drink the tap water when Lauritz and Vidar enter the house. The boy is thrilled. His father has given him a motorcycle. In the meantime, Ran is looking at the pictures in the family album and suddenly brushes away a tear. At this moment, Vidar enters the house and announces that he is ready to take in his new son, which prompts a harsh protest from Ran. Saxa is struck by the abundance of emotion, for Ren has never been jealous of her husband. In the evening, Magne goes to the grill bar and Saxa arrives there as well. Seeing her, the guy pulls out a knife, but the girl just provokes him. At the end of their conversation, they come to the conclusion that their families have lost their minds. Cisterns of drinking water arrive in Edda, and Fjord receives an invitation from Ran to talk. The woman has arrived at Gry's house and is waiting outside. He listens to his mother's account about the changes in the family and refuses to call Ran his mother. They are merely feigning their relationship. He has no intention of going back and wants nothing to do with the firm. Angry, Rand sees the Sayer family and tries to run them over with her car. But Magne manages to react and pushes his loved ones away. Rand apologizes, pretending to have lost control, but Magne doesn't believe her. He grabs the hammer and runs to Wenki. The old woman is frightened. The giants will kill her if they see them together. She's amazed at Magne's attempt to make the hammer because you can't just get it. She promises to tell him how to forge the real Mjolnir. After all, the giants have an ancient weapon with which they can kill anyone. She begins the story of the eternal fire of the ancient gods but notices Rand and hides in the building, promising Magne to tell him everything when he meets her on the mountain. Lauritz comes to Utelheim and is treated to mead. Vidar tells him that the lad is not human and gives him the heart of a deer he has harvested for him. Lauritz eats the meat and visions of ancient giants flash before him. Vidar grabs his hand and shoves it into the fire. The boy screams, but as he pulls his hand out, the burn disappears right before his eyes. He is now invulnerable. Rand sees this and becomes enraged. While the spouses are quarreling, Lauritz goes to the bathroom and after washing his face sees in the mirror the ancient scoffer, half-brother of Odin and father of the serpent Midgardsorm, Loki. And he understands he is his incarnation. Back in the room, he hears Rand say that the cashier is really Volva, and she's going to kill her before Magne gets the hammer. Meanwhile, Magne comes for Lauritz at Utelheim. He asks his brother to return home, and he reluctantly agrees and tells him of Rand's intentions. Magne runs to Wenki. Meanwhile, she closes up store and goes home. But she sees Rand's car and takes off into the sky as a bird. Magne sees her fly away and is glad everything has turned out to be alright. But suddenly Rand draws her bow and pierces the bird with her arrow. The bird falls near the orphanage. The wounded woman reaches Wotan, hands him her medallion and asks him to help Magne. Magne rushes to her, takes her head in his hands, but the woman turns to ash. Magne cries over what was just his mentor, then runs to Rand's car and threatens to kill her. But the woman is very calm. She reassures the witnesses that the boy is simply sick. Iman pulls him away with difficulty. At night, Magne has a dream in which Isolde begs him not to give up. In the morning, the radio announces that the young people of the town are planning a protest. Turid speaks of Magne's intemperance. You should not shout at the school principal in the middle of the street. To this, Magne reminds her of the attempted murder of their family. But Turid is more concerned about the irrepressible appetite of Lauritz, who boasts to his brother of his newly acquired invulnerability. Magne asks to prove his loyalty and to help break into the Utel's house because he thinks the eternal fire burns in their hearth. Lauritz promises to help. Posters and appeals are hung all over Edda to shut down the harmful Utel's production, while Fjord and Gry bring her father to the hospital. The girl is grateful to her boyfriend for his support and is delighted when the boy agrees to spend Saturday night with her family. Meanwhile, Wotan examines Wenki's locket and puts it on himself, and at that moment he is awakened to who he really is, the king of the gods, Odin, who sacrificed an eye to know eternal wisdom and is able to see the present, past, and the future. He is Thor's father and Loki's twin. Wotan begins to behave intelligently and calls Corpseman Halvar a dark elf, which puzzles the man. Meanwhile, Magne continues his training and studies Scandinavian myths, and then sends a message to Iman that he intends to go to Utelheim to forge a hammer there. In the meantime, Turid and Lauritz go to the store, and while Turid is shopping, the boy tortures the man he meets, Erich, with questions about Loki. He tells him that Loki was the father of the snake Midgardsorm, which leads him to believe that Loki was the world's first transgender man. Saxa and Vidar arrive at the square where people are getting clean water in canisters. The girl is convinced that they should show their closeness to the people and then everything will work out, especially since the youth protests are planned. That's where Turid and Lauritz meet them and the latter asks to see Vidar. Saxa goes to the factory to attend to business. When Turid arrives home, she tells them that Lauritz has gone to Utelheim, which angers Magne. They had a deal. Apparently his brother has chosen their side. Meanwhile, Lauritz watches Vidar cook and confesses that he would like to come here more often. When he returns home, he is not given a warm welcome by his brother. But Lauritz earns forgiveness by showing Magne the entrance key to Utelheim he received from Vidar. Meanwhile, there is a dinner party at Gry's house. The father makes a lot of jokes and thanks everyone for what they have been in his life. Gry does not understand what's going on but is glad for a good evening. In the evening, the brothers enter the Utul house when no one is there. Magne sticks his hammer into the burning hearth, with absolutely no idea what's going to happen. And when nothing happens, Vidar walks through the door. Tripping over the backpack left by Magne, Utul pulls out the hammer. Magne has to come out and admits it's his thing. Vidar realizes what they were up to and kicks the guys out. When they return home, they find Erich at the table, who tells them that Mjolnir was forged by stunted creatures that people called dwarfs. Loki became Odin's sibling by swearing on his blood, and when their blood mixed, he became half god, half giant. At night, Ren tries to persuade Vidar to forget about Laur's deception, and the latter promises to kill the boy. In the morning, Wotan gives blood and admits to Iman that he is Odin. The girl summons Magne, who at that moment is invited to the protest against the Utuls. Fjord, who is immediately present, refuses to go with everyone else. Magne arrives at the nursing home where Wotan greets him but addresses Lauritz rather sternly. He does not believe the boy and tells him to leave despite Magne's attempt to convince him otherwise. Loki is a traitor by nature, he cannot be trusted. Lauritz is about to leave but then he sees a table with the blood tests. He tricks the nurse, pulls out Wotan's blood and injects a portion into his own vein. In the meantime, Fjord watches the protest taking place at the factory gate. Gry goes there with him and supports Magne, believing that it is to his credit. Saxa urges her father to respond, at which point Fjord joins the protesters. He steps forward and makes a speech acknowledging the Utul's guilt and promising to do whatever he can to rectify the situation. After all, we all share the same planet. Looking at this, Lauritz is on the fence. Should he go to Vidar or support his brother? At that moment, Gry receives a text message and the girl runs away. Fjord rushes after her, and Lauritz stops Vidar's car and tells him that he wants to go with him. He gets in his car and makes an indecent gesture to everyone. Gry and Fjord rush to the hospital where the girl's mother tells them about the father's suicide. The man swallowed all the sleeping pills and could not be saved. Vidar and Lauritz arrive at Utilheim. The father tells the boy about how the people used to worship them and carry gifts. He demonstrates to the boy that he can change his appearance. So when he supposedly grew old, the place was taken by his son. Vidar was willing to do anything for him, even making him invulnerable. The truth is, there is a weapon that will kill anyone. Giants do not forgive treachery. Suddenly, Magne bursts into the house. He will not let his brother be hurt. Armed with the axe, Vidar rushes at the lad. A fierce fight ensues, with the enemies exchanging blows. While delivering the next blow, Vidar drives the axe into the wall. Magne pushes the man away, and he lands on the edge of the axe sticking out of the wall. His body turns to ash, which terrifies Magne. Magne suffers deeply from all that has happened and feels guilty about Vidar's murder and the loss of Lauritz, but he cannot confess this to his mother, who is immersed in a relationship with Erich. But she is shaken by the news of Vidar's death. The mother sympathizes with her son and he casts hateful glances at his brother. Gry offers her condolences to Fjord, but the latter stuns the girl with a confession that he did not love his father. Meanwhile, Ran urges Saxa to take revenge, though the daughter is cautious about what has happened. They do not know exactly what has happened, they must be careful. But Ren is fixated on hating Lauritz and plans to take revenge on him specifically. But for now, they announce that Vidar died of a heart attack. The rules of Util Industries state that the rights of ownership should pass to the eldest son, but Saxa intends to usurp the position. Exhausted, Magne goes to Fjord and confesses to the murder of his father. By the rules of the ancient world, he must give satisfaction to a relative of the deceased, but the younger Util refuses to take revenge. Upon returning home, Magne discovers forbidding signs on the entrance to his brother's room. Lauritz accuses him of murder. His father was merely going to teach him a lesson. In the meantime, Wotan and Iman arrive at Harry's workshop for the old man's baby carriage, but he cannot do anything about the worn-out mechanism. Magne arrives there as well, and after hearing congratulations on his victory, sharply objects. He has killed a man, and he refuses to go to war. Distraught Lauritz tells the barman that the doctors have discovered a tapeworm parasite inside him, and he begins treatment. In the meantime, Gry and Fjord are eating ice cream on the porch of the barber shop, and the girl admits that her mother intends to move from Edda to the big city. Fjord decides to go with her. He's not going to attend Vidar's funeral. Turid and Magne are summoned to the school, where the boy is given permission to take his final exam and is assigned a topic: Scandinavian myths. After that, Iman tries to convince Magne to return to the battle group. After all, there is no war without casualties. Besides Vidar, there are still giants left, among them his brother. Hearing about Lauritz, Magne loses his temper, and his brother, watching the conversation from afar, sees lights sparking everywhere. Saxa takes on the firm's business with determination and one day talks to Turid, convincing her not to mix emotion and work. Satisfied, the woman thanks the girl for her understanding. Furious, Iman goes to the sports club, where she notices Harry. The girl challenges him to a fight. The guy dismisses it with a joke. Iman gives him a good kicking, but falling down and swallowing blood, the boy gets up again and again. He never gives up. Later, Iman leads him to the old man. She has found the fighter. Apparently, his soul used to live in the body of Tyr, a god of war known for his courage and strength, who lost his arm in a battle with the wolf Fenrir, sacrificing himself to save his friends. Meanwhile, the youths discuss a protest against the util factories and invite Magne to participate, not noticing Saxa, who enters the cafe. The guy is uncomfortable in front of her, but he doesn't know how to stop the conversation. It is Saxa herself who does this. Magne apologizes for losing a father, and the girl accepts the apology. At home, Lauritz takes his medicine and remembers Vidar bitterly. The mother tries to reconcile the brothers, and while Lauritz agrees to hug his brother, he is twisted in violent pain. The boy is taken to the hospital, and the doctors are shocked to see the size of the parasite inside the man. He undergoes surgery, but the worm survives. The doctors intend to examine it because they have never seen anything like it before, but Lauritz intends to keep it. That evening, Fjord and Saxa meet in a secluded spot to discuss the matter. Fjord speaks of Magne's guilt and of his intention to leave with Gry. His sister accuses him of cowardice and she leaves. The day of Vidar's funeral arrives. Magne announces that he's not going to the funeral, but his mother asks him to do so for Lauritz's sake. At this point, the boy leaves the room. He has changed his image again and now looks very much like his father. Magne runs away, unable to see his brother. He comes to the mountain and asks for his powers. He has killed the man and lost his brother. Receiving no answer, Magne goes to the church, where he's rebuked by Lauritz, who sits in the pew of the Util family. The inhabitants of Edda sing psalms, remembering Vidar, without noticing the storm that is coming upon the city. The priest reads a scripture recalling the son's duty to his father, and this is heard by Fjord, who does come to the funeral. Suddenly there is a thunderclap. Magne prays for his powers to be taken away, and Fjord goes to his father's coffin. And the moment the coffin is carried out of the altar, there is a tremendous thunderclap, and all the panes of glass fly out of the windows. Later, Gry and her mother pack up their belongings. The girl waits for Fjord, but he does not come. Instead, it's Magne who comes to say goodbye to the girl. She then goes up to Fjord's house to fetch him. But suddenly, he refuses to go. There is something more precious than her. Seeing the change in his eyes, Gry runs away and asks her mother to leave quickly. The younger Utul goes to the top of the mountain and pulls out the ancient Vidar world axe buried there. The monstrous serpent Midgardsorm is the spawn of Loki. Thor defeats the serpent in the last battle of Ragnarok. Magne wakens from a terrible dream. Isolde looks at him with a reproachful look. He falls down the stairs. He cannot see a thing. Turid brings him his spectacles. Magne understands what has happened. The strength has failed him. That same morning, Saxa admonishes Ren. The woman is abusing alcohol, and Ren wonders whether the girl is indifferent to Vidar's death. The girl nods in agreement. She does not feel anything. She hurries to the factory, but when she enters the floor, she finds Fjord at the desk. He has assumed the duties of the supervisor according to the statute. He exposes Saxa and removes the photo with Gry. Magne goes to Wotan, but he chases the weakling away. Neither Iman nor Harry recognize him anymore. Grieving Lauritz goes to Utilheim, where Rand demands his key back and confirms that Vidar intended to kill him. Meanwhile, Magne is preparing for the exam when Erich makes a remark. The guy puts too much emphasis on this story everyone already knows. It would be much better if you looked at those events from a modern perspective. Magne objects. If good triumphs over evil, it becomes evil itself. Eri is pleased. The moral of the myths is very interesting stuff. At this point, Iman discovers her English grades and becomes indignant. Her language skills are perfect. The grades are all wrong. The girl goes to Ran and uses her powers to get her grades corrected. Meanwhile, Turid discovers that Lauritz has some kind of monster in the aquarium which she finds disgusting. Magne learns that Iman has used her powers to change the grades. He reminds her that the powers are not for personal use. But the girl retorts, he's nobody now, and she does not care what he thinks. Turid demands that the creature be removed from the house, but she's forced to agree to her son's wish when he reminds her of the loss of his father. On his way home, Magne witnesses Harry beating up a guy who wanted to cheat and did not pay for gas. He intervenes but again receives a reminder that his opinion is no longer valued. Later he asks Lauritz to forgive him for he sincerely wanted to protect his brother. He renounced his powers and they were taken away. The brothers embrace, but Loki refuses to help in the battle. Fjord begins to run the firm's affairs with an iron fist and fires Turid for personal reasons. Upon learning this, Magne rushes to the factory and attacks Fjord, oblivious to the fact that his powers no longer exist. Utul ends up beating him and leaving him lying in the parking lot, telling him he doesn't even deserve to die. The battered lad goes to Wotan and asks for permission to rejoin the ranks of the fighters on the condition that he won't kill, but he's reminded that there is no other way of doing it. After Fjord's return, Ren takes his side, especially since Magne has lost his powers. Now the company is the first priority. Saxa is against the new policy, but nobody listens to her. Magne's new sympathizer Signy urges the guy to keep fighting Util Industries while Saxa convinces Lauritz to vote against Fjord. After all, he's a member of the family. In exchange, she offers him the key to Utilheim and money. In the evening, Lauritz comes to the Utils and Fjord has to greet his brother. Meanwhile, Magne goes for a run and sees the installation of the stone on Isolde's tomb. After dinner, Fjord inquires about Lauritz's expectations. He reminds him that Lauritz is also a giant. Fjord is willing to buy his vote because he has much more money than Saxa does. Ran takes Lauritz home and warns him to stay away from her family. Lauritz scoffs. Even as a bastard, he is related to Vidar, while the others are not really family. The whole thing is a farce to those around them as they are barren. Enraged, Ran follows him into the house and attacks Lauritz. Magne tries to help but to no avail. Ran openly promises to destroy his family for the powers have left Magne. But suddenly Turid comes home and Ran leaves. Magne decides to do what he can to win the war and returns to Wotan to regain his powers. Wotan reminds him that his greatest weapon is Mjolnir, his only chance against the giants. Magne agrees to lie to Lauritz and get the key to Utilheim. The team of warriors go to the Util's factory as Odin reminds them shortly before that they have everything they need to make the hammer, Volva's feather and Ran's arrowhead. At the mention of the dwarf's name, Halvor enters the room. All that remains is to find the eternal flame, which can only be found somewhere in the factory. Once inside, the team goes to the old warehouse, but suddenly they see guards. Wotan, Odin, is summoned to divert their attention while they forge the hammer. The old man comes out into the light and pretends he can't walk. The guards are puzzled, but remembering their orders to guard this building particularly closely, they take the old man to the gatehouse, reporting the incident to Fjord. Harry intends to break the lock on the warehouse, but Magne pulls out the key he snatched from Lauritz, lying that he intends to impress Signy by hanging a protest banner in the Util warehouse. Once inside, the team begins looking for the fire. But there is no such thing in sight. Magne reads the words of the saga and everyone understands there must be a dungeon. It must be nearby, and while Iman stays behind to keep watch, the others descend into the cellar and find the ancient forge with the eternal fire blazing. That's when Fjord arrives at the factory. And while the team is working on the hammer, Iman comes out to fight. Under the blows of the sledgehammer, the ancient iron, the feather and the tip of the giant's weapon are fused together. Meanwhile, upstairs there's a deadly battle, and Iman begins to suffer defeat. Harry asks to finish the job and he goes up to rescue his friend. All that remains is to chop the hilt, but Halvor has never done such a thing and it comes out too short. But Magne approves of the dwarf's work, cools the finished hammer and hurries upstairs. Harry orders everyone to run and restrains Fior himself, but the man throwing him back against a door slams it shut, amputating a part of his arm. Iman returns to help, ordering Magne to remove the hammer from the factory. The police arrive and now Halvor goes to them, diverting attention from Magne. The boy gets out of the factory and goes home, where he's greeted by his mother and brother congratulating Magne on his birthday, which he has completely forgotten about. The media reports about a break-in at the factory, a protest banner posted, and the arrest of 4 people. Magne admits that he too was part of the group, and contrary to his fears, Turid takes it calmly. Without even unpacking the presents, Magne goes to the mountain and tries to abandon Mjolnir, but the strength never returns. Magne calls Iman, the hammer doesn't work, and she tells him to do whatever it takes to succeed. He returns home, where Turid asks the boys to go get burgers. They go to a cafe where Signy approves of the action, and Lauritz tries to get the bartender's attention. At this time there is a report on TV about the impending closure of the Utul factories because it has been proven that the production has polluted the environment. In addition, tax evasion has been revealed. Saxa also listens to this report. She tries to rectify the situation and asks for a press conference. Meanwhile, the director of the orphanage fires Iman and Halvor, which provokes protests from the residents. Wotan gives a fiery speech thanking the real heroes and sings the national anthem in their honor. Magne is trying to figure out what to do with Mjolnir when Turid asks her to bring Lauritz things. She's afraid to go into his room because of the horrible pet. Confused, the boy goes into the room and sees a nightmarish worm, a veritable spawn of hell. Lauritz arrives at the cafe where Iman and Harry are resting and catches the bartender in the arms of the expert. The disappointed guy walks away. Meanwhile, Fior announces that he is moving his production to Asia, where governments are more loyal to business. Turid goes to work at the store for the first time that day. Meanwhile, many residents of Edda are afraid that they might lose their jobs and homes. Lauritz, who has given up hope of finding love, feeds his worm, while Magne rereads the ancient tales of Thor again and again. And suddenly it hits him: Thor was created by lightning. And then there is a news announcement on TV that the Norwegian government is backing down on closing the Utul's factories, as it realized that it will lead to massive job losses. Besides, the owners have promised to fix the spill. Fior celebrates his victory while Magne is outraged. His rage electrifies the air around him. He then hears a knocking sound coming from his room. The boy rushes upstairs, sees that the window is open and the hammer is twitching. He picks up Mjolnir, and at that moment Lauritz enters the room too. Lauritz realizes that his brother lied to him. He crafted a weapon that can kill him too. Without answering, Magne goes out into the storm, extends the hammer to the sky, and awakens Mjolnir, holding it in the air until lightning strikes it. His powers return. In Utelheim, Fior and Ran learn that Saxa has given the key to Lauritz and punish her for her treachery. After that, they leave to kill the boy. Magne goes to Utelheim to face Fior but finds Saxa beaten. She sees the hammer and he suddenly feels sorry for the wounded girl. But she does not tell him anything about her family's intention to kill Lauritz. Meanwhile, Lauritz is home alone and hears the enemies approach the house. Saxa tries to persuade Magne to act together while Lauritz hides in the kitchen. Ran does not notice him. Magne understands Saxa's intentions and Ran hears the sound the worm makes in the room. Thinking she has put Magne's vigilance to sleep, Saxa rushes for the hammer, but Magne is ahead of her and is ready to drop the hammer on her head. Meanwhile, Fior catches Lauritz. In Utelheim, a spark flashes between the young men and they grow close. Lauritz begs for mercy and declares that he alone possesses a weapon that can kill Magne. As Fior and Ren are about to leave, Magne appears on the street and attacks them with the Mjolnir. The hammer hits the Utul's car and it explodes. Magne picks up Lauritz, who is battered but still alive, and he promises to forgive his brother for deceiving him. In the morning, he carries his creepy pet to the shore of the morass and after kissing it, lets it go free. He wishes his creature to go big and strong and to avenge all his enemies. Ren and Fior watch this from the shore. The show has had mixed reviews, from good to outright bad. But there's one thing that the viewers agree on: this story is quite compelling. The problem of today, environment, is organically integrated into the plot as one of the key elements of the story. And of course, it's impossible to stay indifferent to the views of the harsh but so beautiful Scandinavian nature. Thanks to the high ratings, the show has been reviewed for a third season this year, 2023.